In the late 19th century, Queen Min passed many reforms to rapidly modernize Korea as a means of protecting it from foreign powers. Yet, these were unpopular amongst many and would lead to internal uproar. As a result, she became a target for foreign powers and would face a tragic fate. Join me to find out what happened to her. The woman who would one day become the Queen of Korea was born on the 17th of November 1851 in the middle region of the Korean peninsula, a kingdom that had been ruled by the Joseon dynasty as a kingdom since 1392. She was born into the Yeohang-min clan, a major aristocratic family which had occupied senior governmental offices for decades. It was owing to her clan background that she would later acquire the alternative name Queen Min, in recognition of her belonging to the Yeohang-min clan. She has popularly become known as the Empress Myeongseong, but this was a name given to her posthumously, following the elevation of the Kingdom of Korea into the Empire of Korea. We do not know very much about her early life, but her education was evidently substantial and inculcated in her many emerging values associated with the West. In appearance, she was rather small and fragile, according to later descriptions, but this contrasted sharply with the strong character she would later display and her ability to direct the politics of the Kingdom of Korea. Her ascent to the royal title began in 1866 when she married King Gojong, who was born a year after Myeongseong and who had assumed the throne in 1864 when he was just 12 years of age. For many years, their marriage was fraught with difficulties. Bookish and learned, Myeongseong is said to have despised her husband's lifestyle. For his part, Gojong favoured drinking and banqueting to the actual running of his government, while his affections were primarily reserved for a series of concubines rather than his wife. But they would eventually form a very close alliance in the course of the 1880s. In 1871, when the Queen turned 20, Korea's relations with its neighbours were beginning to shift in ways which would have dramatic implications for the country for the next 80 years. These focused on Japan. In 1868, a political revolution occurred here, whereby the shogunate, a type of military warrior ruler which had ruled Japan for over 250 years, was ended. In its place, the Japanese Emperor Meiji was restored as head of the state, the emperor having largely been a ceremonial figure for hundreds of years. However, following what is known as the Meiji Restoration, power actually rested in the hands of a clique of reforming and modernizing ministers, who were convinced that the best way to avoid Japan being conquered by the European powers was to adopt Western military, political and economic practices themselves. The roots of the Korean conflict with Meiji Japan lay in the failure of the Korean state to recognize a new Meiji government in the years immediately after 1868, even rebuffing Japanese diplomats who were sent to the Asian mainland to solicit the Joseon dynasty in this respect. Then, in 1873, the Japanese government began considering whether it would invade Korea. Although no such war of expansion was undertaken at the time, we can nevertheless trace the roots of Japanese interventionism to this time. In 1867, when he reached 15 years of age, King Gojong assumed his royal responsibilities. The first years of his formal rule were very difficult, as Japan effectively used gunboat diplomacy to acquire a foothold on the island of Gangwon in southern Korea in 1876, while there were further efforts to intervene in Korean affairs by France and Russia. All of this was occurring as Queen Myeongseong was demonstrating her political acumen. Korean politics was dominated by an intricate system of palace intrigue around the king. By 1880, she was on the rise and had removed Gojong's powerful concubines from the palace. Also, the royal couple's relationship began to steadily improve. By the early 1880s, Queen Min effectively ruled in the place of her husband, who was not as active a figure as his wife. She now set out on an ambitious reform program designed to fundamentally change Korean society. In this, she was influenced by the writings of a Chinese diplomat and political theorist, Huan Songxian, who had written a book called Korean Strategy. In this, Huang had advocated the modernization of Korea along similar lines to those undertaken by Japan over the past 20 years, as the best means of protecting the country from outside interference. Convinced by these arguments, Min now set about opening Korea up to Western trade and diplomacy. More significantly, she began reforming the military to use modern armaments and artillery, aware that traditional fighting columns of the Joseon dynasty would never be able to stand up to the armies of Japan or the European powers. Following another one of Huan's ideas, Min also began aligning Korea more closely to Russia, its near neighbour to the north, in order to counteract Japanese efforts to intervene on the Asian mainland. To aid in all of this, Queen Myeongseong invited teachers from the United States into Korea from early 1880s, as well as sending fact-finding missions to America in order to learn how to modernize the Joseon kingdom, a method which again had been employed by Japan in its own modernization process during the early 1870s. Additionally, schools for girls and women were set up around Korea by the Queen, in an effort to afford women a greater position within society. Further reforms were more mundane, but just as consequential. These include the development of a modern system of bureaucracy and administration to replace the labyrinth politics of the Korean palace. In doing so, it was possible to begin gathering a far higher level of taxes from throughout the Joseon kingdom, and within it, begin developing trade and industry as a means of paying for a more efficient military. For instance, steam engines were imported from the United States and Europe to begin setting up basic factories, while the mid-1880s witnessed the construction of a significant communications infrastructure, notably telegraph lines which connected Korea to China and Japan. Similarly, the Korean coinage was reformed and a new central mint was established to aid the economy. Modern agricultural methods were also introduced to better avoid food shortages and increase the productivity of what was still a largely agrarian society at that time. Taken as a whole, these measures were designed to make the Korean state able to defend itself against the perilous threat it faced from outside invasion, particularly by Japan. Yet these reforms, which Queen Myeongseong was supporting, did not go unopposed. Chief amongst these opposition movements was a rebellion led by the traditional Korean military caste in 1882, owing to the resentment to the alterations in the Joseon armies. This was eventually put down, but the turmoil created by what was termed the Imo incident allowed for China and Japan to further meddle in Korea's internal affairs. In 1884, there was an attempted overthrow of the regime, undertaken by certain members of the Yangban. These were traditional aristocracy of Korea, who were disillusioned by the reforms Myeongseong and Gojong had implemented in the past 5 or 6 years. Although their attempted coup d'etat would fail in 1884, it was indicative of things to come. In 1894, a wide range of disaffected groups within Korea, consisting of a mix of the Yangban caste and also the Korean peasantry, revolted against the Joseon monarchy. This insurrection has become known as the Donghak Peasant Revolution. Although it would be put down in the spring of 1895, the revolution became a pretext for renewed meddling in Korea's affairs by both Japan and China. It also led to the outbreak of a war, the first Sino-Japanese War, between Korea's two most significant neighbours. With its interest in Korea given fresh vigour by these developments, Japan now set itself on a course to make the Asian peninsula a vassal state of the Meiji regime in Tokyo. As it did, it was realised that the primary obstacle to Japanese dominance of Korea was the Korean Queen, who had driven the modernization of the country in the 1880s and fended off Japanese intervention at that time. As a result, the Japanese realised that she needed to be removed, and believed that, by assassinating her, their objectives could be accomplished. The idea was that if she was removed from the scene, the king, a much weaker figure than his strong-willed wife, could be encouraged to allow Japanese incursions into Korea, effectively making the Joseon kingdom a vassal state of Japan without the need for military conquest. Over 50 Japanese men were involved in her murder, including several military officers. This was done with the complicity of hundreds of Korean soldiers stationed around the palace, many of them belonging to the Yangbang caste. These allowed the Japanese assassins to enter into the central chambers of the royal palace and locate the Empress, and many of these Koreans were also directly involved in the assassination. Having heard the commotion caused by her assailants as they entered the palace, the Empress attempted to disguise herself and flee from the palace. However, this failed and she was killed in one of the outer chambers by troops led by a Korean, Myeongseong. Thus, the Queen died immediately as a result of her wounds on the 8th of October 1895 at the Okuro Pavilion in the Gyeonggang Palace in what is now the city of Seoul. The murder, known as the Yulmi incident, was orchestrated by the Japanese minister in Korea, Muragoro, and sadly, it was a result of her extensive opposition to Japanese encroachments into Korea of the past 15 to 20 years. Her body was subsequently burned and buried, perhaps in some sort of effort to disguise the manner of her death. Eventually, she was buried in the imperial tomb of Gyeongnyeong in the city of Namyangju. In the aftermath of the Empress's assassination, there was widespread outrage, both internally within Korea and internationally, among certain legations within the country. To counter these, the Japanese did undertake a phony investigation in which 56 individuals were charged with being complicit in her murder. However, these were all acquitted in Japanese courts, due to the dubious basis of a lack of evidence. Inadvertently, the assassination of the Empress had the opposite effect to that which the Japanese had hoped for. Rather than diminishing resistance within the country to Japanese encroachments, her murder led, at least temporarily, to widespread opposition to Japan within Korea during the late 1890s. Accordingly, in 1997 the Kingdom of Korea was declared to be the Empire of Korea, with Gojong as its emperor. In the process, Queen Myeongseong was posthumously declared to be an empress. To protect itself from further Japanese aggressions, the new empire also drifted closer to Russia. However, this dispensation only lasted for a limited period of time. In 1904, war broke out between Japan and Russia, but when this ended in Russian defeat the following year, Korea's fate was largely sealed. No longer able to prevent Japanese encroachments, in 1910, the Japan-Korea Annexation Treaty was signed, making Korea the first major part of the Empire of Japan, which would significantly expand over the next 35 years. Thus, the reforms which Empress Myeongseong had undertaken to try and protect her country would prove unsuccessful in later years. Thank you so much everyone for watching this video on Empress Myeongseong. I hope you found it interesting. Let me know what you thought of her life down below in the comments, and if you want more Oriental type stories like this, be sure to let me know so I can research them and get them out for you guys. If you have any other suggestions, also be sure to leave them down below in the comments, and I hope you guys are subscribed and have notifications turned on to get all my videos as soon as I upload them. Anyway, that's all from me, so I'll see all of you in the next Forgotten Life. Thanks.